Hi everyone, welcome to another Thoughts on Books video. I haven't done one of these in a while. I did one on We Have Always Lived in the Castle. That's the first I did since like my first batch. And now I'm doing one again, and I'm back with the green screen. I'm going to try to use Adobe Premiere to edit this video with the better chroma key. So no guarantee that this is going to look good, but hopefully the green screen is going to work out okay. But I'm back with another Thoughts on Book video. I felt like I really needed to make this one for a multitude of reasons, and that would be it. Friggin' gargantuan. So, for anyone who is kind of new to my videos, who maybe have stumbled upon this video because it is popular right now, I just want to say that this isn't necessarily like a strict scripted type of video review. It's more of like a relaxed, here, look, I wonder how this will look on the green screen. I don't even know. Very relaxed type of video. I'm not going to be like rushing through all my thoughts. I will be edited down and, cut to edit out all of the boring parts, but it's not going to be like that. So just so you know, if that's the type of video you like, this is not going to be that kind of video. So I was kind of looking for a book to read or listen to, and I decided on it. I listened to the audiobook read by Stephen Weber, who did a fantastic job, I'll say. It was partially because the movie was coming out, and I felt like, okay, movie's getting a lot of like really good feedback. Maybe I haven't read a Stephen King book since The Stand, which, was also very large and giant. That was back in like 2004 or whatever it was when I did my Thoughts on Books video for that. And I hadn't read a Stephen King book in a while. I wanted to do The Shining, but I never got around to it. And with it, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to dive in. I want to see how long it would take me. And it took me about 3 months to get through it. Which I think, compared to however long it was, like 5 months, 8 months for The Stand, they're about the same size. I feel like I did okay. I actually turned the audiobook to 1.25 speed when I was like halfway through the book, and it shaved 2 hours off, and I'm like, geez, that's ridiculous. But I read it, and now I kind of want to talk about it. You'll see in the title of this video, it's the thoughts on plus a review of the movie, because I saw the movie after I read the book. And I want to talk about the movie, but I'm not going to do it in tandem with the book a whole lot. I'm going to try to kind of segregate it. So for anyone who's come here looking for just the movie review, I would say skip to this time, because up until that point, it's just going to be all book stuff. So I'm going to try to split it up as much as I can, keep them separate, but I will talk about the movie. So I'm going to go really kind of broad first. I'm going to talk a little bit about themes, story, characters, things like that before kind of narrowing in on details. This is a massive book. A lot happens in it. I would say it feels like a lot more happens in this than does in The Stand. It feels a lot more eventful. The Stand is like chaotic beginning, slow middle, mildly chaotic end, and then kind of a subtle ending. Whereas it kind of always has movement in some way or another. Pardon me, I have kind of like a cold, so this is perfect time to do a video like this. Yeah, I'm not gonna try to dive into too many details because it is such a massive book, and I don't want this video to be 40 million years long. So I'll kind of start broad and then kind of narrow in, but I'm gonna keep it brief. So we'll start with like the themes. Like there's a lot of interesting things that Stephen King tries to do in this story. Loss of innocence, loss of memory, childhood, coming of age, fear. There's a lot of different things kind of like intermingling and kind of at play with each other. And I think that I'll just like to give like a real brief like review in a sentence synopsis. I'll say that it was enjoyable but a mess, in places. It was a lot tightly constructed than I anticipated it would be, but still it's a little sloppy. But mostly for me on the theme level. Obviously, spoilers. If you can tell, I'm going to talk about all aspects of the book. Certain elements like the obvious controversial sex scene that happens with the kids right near the end of the book. A handful of other like kind of the camaraderie of the kids, how like the dialogue of the kids as well, just kind of like are a little cheesy at times, don't quite connect to the themes the way I feel like they should. But it's sort of here and there. It's not always a consistent problem, I would say. But I feel like after finishing the book and leaving the story and just kind of like having it reverberate in my head, I would say that the effectiveness of the themes are a lot more effective that's an A effective and then an effective. In retrospect, it's kind of interesting because like after I finished the book and days had passed, it just kind of sunk in and seems to be a lot better. This might just be a Stephen King thing. Really, like these initial problems that I have with these surface level things, reading this book, I realized like, okay, this book to me makes it obvious why people either love or hate Stephen King. Because like he really exhibits both sides of his coin on this one. He rambles in this book to great effect and defect. It's fascinating. So there's like for example, there's a segment here at the beginning of chapter 3, 6 phone calls. There's about a 10 to 14 page stretch that is dedicated solely to Patty Uris, the wife of Stan, diving into like her past and a little bit of her backstory, just to preface her reacting to Stan's suicide in the bathtub. And that was one instance where, I mean, that was 3 months ago when I read that thing, because it's such a massive book. That was a long time ago. There, it may have been like worthwhile in retrospect. Maybe if I read the book again, something will come back. But reading that moment and then finishing up the chapter, I was like, why did I have to sit through 10 pages of this woman who never shows up in the book again? And then that's when I realized, like, okay, like someone, like me is going to complain about that and be like, that's not really necessary. And then like also me goes like, that's world building. She's an interesting character now. Like it wasn't boring to listen to this thing about this woman, but it did kind of detract from the story where it's like I want to keep going. It's like I talked about in my Dark Tower review when I talked about Wizard and Glass, where it's like the book is fine on its own, but it feels rambly just because it's not progressing anything. It's not moving the story along. It's just providing a kind of, foundation to move something forward a little more strongly. And on the flip side of that, you have the Patrick Hockstetter part, which was one of my favorite parts of the book. The entire Patrick Hockstetter set of chapters, parts, whatever you would call it, was one of my favorite sections of the book. And it was a detour, but it also helped to lift that character, give him some grounding. And then, like, when he did die, that really helped, like, put the nail in the coffin and, like, shove that part home. And it was super effective. I loved that so much. So it's not so much that I dislike when King rambles. I dislike when King rambles for no reason. But let's talk about characters. Like I said before, the dialogue. The kids in 1958 occasionally just don't talk like human beings do. It may have just been the reading of the audiobook, but it seemed to just be in the words alone. They seem to talk in ways that like humans don't seem to, and the like third person omniscient like narration like was like, yes, and they felt more powerful and strong and connected, and there was something amazing there because the turtle was holding them together and they loved each other. And just like, I love you, Bill. I love you, Beverly. I love you, Richie. And it's like, it was a little much at times. I mean, granted, King was, high on cocaine writing this book. This was kind of in the peak of his substance abuse. But, I'm not going to just have that be an excuse for any problem in the book. But I will say it does seem to kind of lend itself to just the feel of this book. It seems like he was high on something. Richie's dialogue was a little ridiculous at times. It sort of made it difficult to connect to Richie when all he would ever do is just speak in a crazy voice in the most inopportune times. And I don't mean that like socially, but just like rhythm of the story wise, where it's like, why are you talking like this now, Richie? I mean, calm down. And then times when kids would say like some ridiculous thing, and then like Stephen King says that they all burst out into uproarious laughter that lasted for a minute. And I'm like, it was not that funny. Kids would not laugh for that long, especially after what just happened to them in any given circumstance, that kind of thing. But dialogue aside, I loved all the kids. They're all very vivid in my mind. Stephen King is fantastic at painting characters, more often than not. I remember like all the little details of all the kids. It's fantastic. Really, all the characters in this story are pretty good. Like I said, my favorite being Patrick Hockstetter. That was just an incredible, like, King has a way of taking the macabre and managing to like put it in like a really specific and unique framing, to make it like really visceral and effective. And yeah, like Patrick, that whole section was just brilliant. As far as story goes, I was interested in how he structured the book, because it goes like in chunks where it's like, all right, this chunk is the kids meeting each other in 1958 and becoming friends. This chunk is all the grown-ups coming back to Maine and meeting up. This chunk is, them leading up to the first It battle. And then like the last chunk, I thought it was going to go like, okay, the kids battle It, and then interlude, and then the adults battle It. But the last section cuts back and forth. And when I realized that was going to happen, I was like, oh, this is going to be a mess, tonally. Because if you have it to where the kids are defeating It at the same time as the adults, it's going to feel like I don't feel triumphant for you kids, because I know that that's like the middle of the story and you have all the rest to go through that I just heard. And it just seemed a little disjointed at times, but it worked in certain ways. But that was a little odd. I thought King did a really good job at transitioning one thought to the next in terms of the time jumps. It really connected with the loss of memory and the regaining of memory, because as the adults remembered things that they had forgotten, then that became a reason to tell that story in the book for us readers. And it would like kind of transition seamlessly into the past, and I thought that was really cool. I really enjoyed the macroverse stuff, the cosmic horror side of it, the Lovecraftian side of it, which I think is something that people who enjoy it, and especially like with the miniseries and especially with the movie, it's just something that like isn't quite in the forefront of people's minds. And it's like reading the book, like the section, I forget what the name of the chapter is, the smoke hole. I love that chapter. It was fantastic. Who was it? Was it Richie and Mike? I think. Last one's in the smoke hole, and they finally like see a vision of it plummeting to Earth billions, millions of years ago. And I'm just like, reading, listening to this book, and I'm like, this is good. This is good stuff. And the ritual of Chud. Oh my gosh, fantastic. The battle of the metaphysical battle of wits and wit, with Bill and it going head to head, like fantastic stuff. I've said ad nauseum on this channel, 2001 Space Odyssey is my favorite movie of all time. And that segment, in both the kid and the adult battling of it, the ritual of Chud, the way it's described through these like really strange visuals and the way things are represented, reminded me a ton of the end of 2001. So I was like right at home. I was like, that's good stuff. That's real good stuff. I also like the idea, like the way that its features were revealed over time. Like, oh, it's a female. Oh, it's gonna lay eggs maybe. The fact that it's like this is the physical representation on Earth, whereas like there's still, kind of like a mind-body dualism where there's still like a soul that cannot be killed, but you can kill like the earthly being. I thought that was all really fascinating stuff. I really appreciated how he handled the romance as well. It wasn't a main focus, but it still was done correctly, I feel. Like having, like, because you have this feeling like it's right that Bill and Beverly connect, but on the same token, it's like it's not right that they end up together. It's this really interesting thing where it's almost like the perfect thing that wasn't not meant to be, and that like Ben and Beverly, that's so much more correct, and like Bill and Audra, like him taking care of Audra, that final epilogue, I think it was like a fantastic way to kind of bookend the novel as well. One thing I really, really liked was the sections that describes Derry just falling apart during the battle, while it was being like destroyed, down in the depths, by the adults. Derry was just falling apart at storms, raining, floods, foundations of buildings just sinking into the earth, a handful of people dying. Really interesting because it really hammered home the point that it had become really like a spiritual part of this town. It's a really like fascinating point, and it was like fantastic that King included that because that really helps to kind of like paint the picture of like how much influence it had in Derry. I'll also say, in slight reference to the movie and the miniseries, I was going into this kind of afraid of how King would handle the situations where it was attempting to attack and kill the children. Because, obviously you're reading this thing, whatever, watching the movie, these kids don't really die in the initial like attacks that happen in like the middle of the story, right? So I remember the miniseries, which I haven't seen. I've seen like reviews of it, so I'm familiar with it. But I know that it's like ridiculous in terms of like, oh, it's obvious Pennywise didn't kill the kid right here because it was poor writing and visual filmmaking, and they just did a botched job at building this scene. So going into the book, I was like, I wonder how King is going to handle this, and I think he did a fantastic job. Because you need to present it in a certain way to where it's believable. And the thing with it is that you have to realize like what his rules are, what his restrictions are. He won't, he tries to get kids alone because then he can instill fear better, because if they're not afraid, then it's like an attack against him. And that's something that, he hasn't experienced up until, this book, and it's just more effective to do it one-on-one. So the kid has to be alone, typically. So like he'll lead kids off, separate them. You see that a lot, and adults really can't be around. And also he needs a way to get the body back to the sewer in order to feed on it, presumably. So there's a lot of, or at least a handful of things that need to be in place for it to attack and kill a child. And in the book, they're represented clearly, like, fine, perfect, got it. A lot of kids die in the barrens, around the barrens, near the sewers. It just all makes sense. So I was really pleased with that in terms of the book. And I'll get to it with the movie, because I have some thoughts on that with how the movie handled it. But I'll just say that I was very pleased that in the book, as far as I can remember, I can't recall a time when I was, like, my suspension of disbelief was broken because, characters had plot armor on and they couldn't die because they needed to live through the rest of the story. So that was a pretty strong element to me. I think that's mostly it, no pun intended, for the book. Like I said, there's so much in the book, so much that happens. But on a whole, I really appreciated and liked a lot of things that Stephen King did. Again, like I said, a few messy things here and there. But as a whole, I think it was a really enjoyable book to read. And I'm kind of amazed that, like, a book this large manages to be a #1 New York Times bestseller. Because this is 1,100 pages and it's pretty big. A lot happens in it. There's a lot to take in. But I think it's really encouraging to know that, like, even books this big, people are still reading these, and these are still in high demand. So that's a good thing. So now I'll talk a bit about the movie. For all you people who jumped ahead, hello, welcome. So I saw the movie last night. The new It adaptation, Chapter 1, 2017. It's okay. It's super overhyped, in my opinion. As someone just coming off the book, watching the movie, I would say, well, I mean, it depends on, like, your perspective here, because, like, contextually, there's a lot of bad King adaptations, and this is one of the best. That's hands down easy to say. I mean, Dark Tower, garbage earlier this year. This comes out, wow, it's like night and day. It's crazy. If I do have to praise this movie, I would praise, like, my favorite part of this movie, hands down, the casting choice for Bill, Child Bill, like 11 out of 10. Like that was, like, the perfect person to play Bill as a kid. Like, I was flabbergasted with how fantastic he was. Because he gave off this sense of, that vulnerability with his lisp and having his brother die and everything, like, that was there. But also, like, this strong sense of leadership was there too. And I was like, wow, this kid. The other kids that I think are really good. Some of them are, like, a little out of place, like the actor who plays Mike. He's just kind of there. But that's mostly due in part to the fact that they removed the, like, historical findings that Mike does and gives it to Ben, which I think is really strange, because then it leaves Mike nothing to do, and he shows up into the gang, like, halfway through the movie, and doesn't really have time to connect with anybody. He just kind of feels like a last-minute addition, and then he's there. Like, I kind of understand why they gave it to Ben, because he's the new kid and wants to learn more about Derry, but aside from that, I don't see why Ben should be doing that. It's really bizarre. Like, just let Mike do it still. I don't know. One thing that I was super impressed with, though, was, like, all right, you have a 2-hour, 12-minute movie, trying to tackle half of this, basically 600 pages, right? So what are you going to do? How are you going to consolidate it is the thing. And I was incredibly impressed with how quickly and effectively they were able to get all of the kids grouped together. Because you got to do that quickly. And in the book, I mean, you have freaking, a whole part, like 5-6 chapters to do that, and that's tough to try to stay true to the source material and also get that done in like 20 minutes, because you don't have time. But they made the smart decision of having, because as far as I remember in the book, Georgie's body is found at the sewer. He's not pulled into the sewer like in the movie. They find his body there and there's closure. In the movie, like I said, could be completely wrong. In the movie, his body is dragged into the sewer and he's just declared missing. So Bill has like tried to figure out a way, like, okay, he went missing at that storm drain. And then like he builds like an elaborate model and it shows that like a body would wash into the Barrens. So he's like, I want to look in the Barrens to find the body of my brother, or just find my brother. And so he recruits, Richie, I think Richie, Stan, Eddie. No, I think that's it. I think it's just those four: Bill, Richie, Eddie, Stan. Like they're a group of friends. They go down to the Barrens because Bill's like, I want to look in this tunnel, and then Ben shows up from his first chapter as a kid where he falls into the Barrens via Henry. He shows up. Bev meets Ben at school. I think, and then she just like kind of coincidentally like runs into the rest of them. I think that sort of happens in the book. I can't remember. And then Mike becomes part of the group, pretty similar in a way to in the way that happens in the book. So I was really impressed with that. Like they managed to make that very effective. Like by changing that one thing, it really expedited that. However, characters. One thing that I was super disappointed with. Not disappointed, but just kind of like, I mean, I guess disappointed, but it made sense why they did this. Patrick Hockstetter in the movie, like, wow. Like from the very beginning, he's already a part of Henry's gang. And when Henry and them knock Ben into the Barrens and they go chasing after him, Patrick just gets lost in a tunnel and gets killed by it, and he just kills him. I think they say his name like once, and that's when he's in the tunnel. I don't even think you hear his name before that. And then he just becomes a missing kid. Like, I understand why you would take out all of that from the movie, because that's a pretty difficult section to kind of adapt into a movie that's already over 2 hours long. So I get it, but on the same token, like, oh, that's disappointing. It's so disappointing to see Patrick just turned into someone who dies with, hairspray and a lighter in the tunnels. But whatever. I understand. I think Henry was effective in the movie. I don't understand why they left it off the way they did, though, because in the children's section of the book, before it cuts to, 27 years later, Henry goes crazy from seeing it and then is blamed for the murders of all the kids, and Victor and Belch are killed by it. In the movie, Henry is shoved down a well and we don't know his fate. And Victor and Belch, you don't see them. The last time you see him was before Henry kills his dad. So I don't know what happened to them. I don't know like what their plan is for the next movie to like factor in those three people, because it's pretty solid in the book as to like what happens to them and what continues to happen. But we'll see. Like the first hour and I'll say hour and 40, hour and 50 minutes, however long, is pretty good. It's not bad. There's a lot in there that's really commemorable. I would say a couple little like Easter eggs, almost no pun intended, because there's a segment where Ben is in the library and he follows a balloon stupidly into the bottom of the library, and he follows these eggs on the floor, and I'm like, that is like fantastic foreshadowing, because in the adult section, Ben runs after Richie and Bill, who are chasing it, who's trying to run away and survive, and Ben stomping on its eggs as they're going down. And I'm like, that's great foreshadowing. And I thought that they were going to do that with Mike, because there's a moment where Mike is like looking at a door, and like there's red light behind it, and you see like the door open, and you see like these like blackened hands come out, and like then it closes and smoke comes out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is that the black spot? Like, are they alluding to the black spot? That's awesome. But then they just turn it into like, Mike's like, my parents died and they tried to get me and from the other side of the room, but the door was too hot. And I survived, but when they found him, their hands were like burned to the bone. And then like the scene like stops like right after that. And I'm like, okay, why? I don't know why he had to kill off his parents. I don't understand that, because I thought you were going to do the black spot thing. I thought this is where you were going. Like, you don't need to change that, but whatever. But back to that egg thing, to connect to what I said in my book part of this review, there's at least one moment in the new movie where my suspension of disbelief was broken just for a bit. Like I said, it's believable in the book every time it tries to attack and kill and kidnap a kid. Because, it doesn't do it when adults are around, etc., etc., tries to take it back to the sewer. In the movie, when Ben's going down the steps and he steps on the eggs, or picks up the eggs and like turns around, sees the headless person coming down, chases him through, he's running away, looks back, it's Pennywise, who says something, turns back, runs into a woman, looks back, Pennywise isn't there. So, like, immediately I'm like, okay, there's a woman here. Like, why are you chasing Pennywise? You're not going to catch him if you're going to just disappear when there's a woman around. It's a public library. And B, where are you going to take him? Like, you need to get him to the sewer. Is there a sewer access in the bottom of the library? Maybe there is, but it wasn't really established. So that was kind of whatever. However, when it does appear to Mike with the whole like hands in the door thing, then the door opens and you see Pennywise in the background. But then Henry runs in with his car and kind of knocks Mike down, and so that's like, okay, an interruption. That's fine. But there's like some distance, it's not like it necessarily knew they were coming. He doesn't have omniscience. He doesn't see the future. But I mean, he can ready himself up when people are coming. So that was a little more acceptable to me. The part where it kidnaps Beverly was a little but I mean, this transitions nicely into my real complaint about the movie, which is the last fourth, the final act, which I think they just kind of fumbled a little bit. They turned it into, oh, Beverly gets kidnapped, damsel in distress, let's go save her. They go to save her, and they're fighting it, which is okay, how they're fighting it, because like it keeps appearing to all the kids as what they fear, which is done very effectively, I think, as the scene plays out. But then it takes Bill, and it's like, let me have Bill, and then you can all go and live happy lives. And Bill's like, just go, I've let you into this. I'm like, this is dumb. This is like these are like the kidnapping Beverly and going to save her, and like Bill being like, just go, let him take me. Like, these are kind of things that like conflict with the tone of the source material, I feel. Like, these are scenes and plot beats that wouldn't have happened in the book, because that wasn't the rhythm that it was going with. So it felt really out of place in the end here. I don't know. It was just kind of weird. But my biggest complaint, the least favorite thing about this movie, is no ritual of Chud at all. Like, they just confront the fears and then kill it. And I was like, oh man, really? Which I understand, like, you don't have a whole lot of time to introduce the ritual of Chud, but it's like, that's such a cool thing. It's such a pivotal moment. I'm willing to forgive them slightly if with the next movie, like they're willing to go like 2.5 hours, whatever, establish some things. I know they want to go into the black spot stuff, which they actually filmed some of that stuff for It Chapter 1. I think some things were cut or whatnot, which is kind of sad to me. I hope I get to see a director's cut if it comes out. But with the next movie, I hope they dive into the Ritual of Chud. I want that to be part of the movie, because as far as I can remember, I haven't seen it, but of all the things I've seen, there's no Ritual of Chud in the miniseries either. So there's been no visual adaptation that has tackled the Ritual of Chud, and I think that is incredibly awful. Like you have the opportunity to have Bill Denbrough flying through space past a turtle, hitting a row of wooden pickets, and Richie shows up and is like, "Dude." It's it's a fantastic scene. I'm doing a horrible job at explaining it, but it's such a crazy, unique and visceral scene and moment. That's gold. That's cinema gold, and you're throwing it away. I don't know. Like I said, I understand that they built the climax to go a certain way, and then it did. But it's I don't know. It departed a little too much from the source material for me, where it's these are some foundational things. The whole last part of the book is titled The Ritual of Chud, and it encaptures how many chapters does it do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's right here, see? Right there, Ritual of Chud, the whole thing. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it was an okay movie. I didn't dislike it. I will say that much. I did not dislike it. I think incredibly strong, given all of the Stephen King adaptations that have come out in the past. That being said, I did see 1922 on Netflix, which was pretty good. And I've been wanting to watch Gerald's Game, but I haven't got around to it yet. But yeah, I was mostly impressed. Disappointed in a couple places, but in ways that I understand. I get it. But I'm eager to see what Chapter 2 does. In 2019, I think September 2019 is when they're estimating that'll come out. Yeah, it was okay. It's okay. But that's all I have for it. This giant thing. Next book I am reading is The Princess Bride, which I don't have here with me right now. It's in the other room. I'm going to read The Princess Bride because I never read it before. Everybody grew up with the movie, but a select few have read the book, so I really want to read the book. William Goldman. I'm really excited for that. And then after that, I'm going to dive into Tolkien, hardcore. I have The Hobbit, and I just recently got this awesome leather-bound Lord of the Rings, $20, but it's the full tome, sits open, like a Bible, leather-bound Bible, really awesome. So I'm gonna reread The Hobbit because I've read that, and then I'm gonna read Lord of the Rings because I never read it, and I'm really eager for just some physical paper, just Tolkien hardcore. I'm ready for that. So maybe I'll make I might make a video for Princess Bride. We'll see. It's really just if I have things to say about it. I thought about doing a video for Watership Down after I read it because that was a marvelous book and I loved it a lot, but I didn't really have a lot to say about it. Kind of like my Great Gatsby video, which I probably really shouldn't have made because I said 3 things and then the video was over. So really, if I have enough to say, I'll make a video, but that's what I'm reading next. Videos I have coming up next, I'm making a video for one of my favorite movies of all time, which is a romantic comedy. And the video is going to be kind of half about the movie without spoilers, because I want people to watch it, and then half about just what I think about romantic comedies. So that's coming out. Look out for that. I'm planning on making that soon. And yeah, thank you everybody for watching this video very much. Please do things down there if it feels good to do them. Bye.